So our conversation on the breakdown of the nutritional parameters will be as follows. Here you see on the screen three let's three color coded elements. Hemp, banana, flax, raspberry, cocoa powder, Brazil nuts. In pink is my breakfast, typical breakfast. Then in blue, I color coded lunch or snacks because I typically don't eat much during the day. And then in orange is my power salad. And all ingredients, I put dot in the end because the ingredients vary sometimes. Sometimes there's dill, basil, sometimes there are different greens, different proportions, and whatnot. So the exact measures that I used for these calculations will be in the description box. So you can either recalculate my data, or you can also use these values for designing your own diet. So let's start with the macros. Here you see the bar chart that is color coded accordingly to the elements, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner. How much each of those elements contribute to the daily values of whatever we're measuring here. And I plotted here grams of protein, carbs, sugar, fiber, fat. Total calories that I calculated are given on the top. And with dashed lines, black dashed lines, I put my Fitness Pal recommended values for maintenance at 48 kilograms of weight. So they recommended me to stay at 1700 calories with my level of daily activity. However, my daily activity drastically increased nowadays. And in general, the caloric theory, I mean, it's subject to lots of questions. So the difference between the total calories is, of course, is drastic, which would correspond to weight gain with my assumed metabolic rate, with my assumed activity level. But in fact, I stay at my optimal weight. It fluctuates maybe within 1 kilogram, so about 2 pounds, but no more than that. And here on top in green, I put the total values, cumulative values accrued from breakfast to dinner. And let's see, what do we read here? We can see that even in protein, I am exceeding the recommended daily value as a my Fitness Pal, on my raw plant-based diet, and it is majorly owing to, again, hemp, flax, sprouts, pumpkin seeds, and greens. Now it will be pretty clear if you run those calculations. Those plants are incredible powerhouses. And of course, carbohydrate excess is not surprising for us because, again, we're in the plant family. In terms of sugar, it's worth mentioning that all sugar that I consume on my diet, it comes from whole sources. So I put oranges or other fruit here. The amount of fruit varies. The type of fruit varies from day to day. So here I put about for 3 oranges. All of those things total to 100 grams of sugar. So it's apparent to me that this sugar is not comparable with any chocolate bar, with anything with refined sugar, juices, or nothing. I don't consume juices. Everything you see here, all those ingredients come from whole food sources. Then, if we look at the fiber content, it's another not surprising thing. I exceed the fiber by a lot. And it's worth mentioning that the size of the salad that I eat, I started dropping it down, eating about 3/4 of what I'm presenting here in terms of greens, not in terms of pumpkin seeds or like cucumber, tomato, carrots, something like that. And I started substituting some fraction of greens um, with walnuts. But fiber content is through the roof, which is good because we need to feed our symbiotic bacterial flora. And it feeds off of cellulose, it feeds off of insoluble fiber and resistant starches. So that's a pretty adequate metric. Of course, it floats depending on how many greens I add to my salad because those are one of the powerful contributors to the fiber content. And then fat. Fat here will be quite surprising for many people, especially the skeptics of vegan nutrition, because quality fats are something that where vegan diets tend to be deficient. So people tend to eat either refined oils, which I don't do. I don't add olive oil to my salad. The only oil that I do, occasionally I put it in desserts because it holds this shape in the fridge, is coconut oil. Coconut oil is a saturated fat which has some healing properties, which has some affinity to our respiratory system. So in moderation, it has certain health benefits, and its moderate usage can be beneficial for our body. So fat here in this specific scenario comes from hemp seeds, flax seeds, avocado, and pumpkin seeds and nuts. So here I put Brazil nuts. However, a handful of almonds here and there is always present in my diet. So the caloric value that I'm presenting here can be increased further by 200-300 kilocalories, which is shocking for a raw plant-based diet, but this is what happens. So fat, I'm exceeding more than by a factor of 2 per day. And let's now look at the amino acid breakdown. Let's zoom in on the protein content and analyze the essential amino acids here. So one of the concerns that people have or may have with vegan diet, with raw vegan diet, is methionine. And we can see here that it's almost reaching 100% of daily value with the menu that I am proposing. So the major contributors to the methionine here are trusty hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds. Those are powerful when it comes to methionine. In general, just judging from this view, you can notice that my breakfast is the major contributor to the essential amino acids. And this is due to hemp. Hemp protein, whatever you have access to, whatever you manage to find liking for, absolutely go for it. Hemp is it's incredible that it was forgotten. It started being something regarded as something superfoody, something vicious, even though it used to be used for making paper, fabrics, and it was a food source throughout the generations. Especially it is ancestral food for those who descend from northern European regions. I'm Russian, and hemp and flax were the most abundant food sources back in the day. So nowadays we look at hemp as like sprinkle it on your salad, when in fact it is the most complete source of nutrition that is absolutely worth introducing in the diet, whether you are vegan, not vegan, and why it will be clear on the next slides that I will show with vitamins and minerals. But here we see that there's a clear view that the breakfast with hemp included in it is the most powerful contributor to the contents of essential amino acids. And here I did breakdown of greens as well. So the salad with pumpkin seeds I eat a lot, about 70 to 100 grams. So I'm sorry, forgive me. I know I'm a PhD. I presented the conferences, but I didn't introduce error bars. Forgive me for that. These things will float, of course. So there is some potentially undershoot or overshoot for some days where I can have varied data, varied measures of how many pumpkin seeds I put in my salad. But at about 100 grams of pumpkin seeds and with hemp seeds for breakfast, you get plenty essential amino acids, and there is no point of concern. And another important note is that some essential amino acids, they break down upon thermal treatment. It's not just protein coagulation. It's also the breakdown of amino acids, which we won't see with raw foods. Another thing, when we eat complex proteins, we need to spare lots of amino acids to produce the enzyme proteins, to break down proteins, to break down the peptide chains. So this is not the case with raw plant-based nutrition. So it may be superior in the supply of those amino acids. And plus, given the completeness, again, as we will see from the next slides, completeness of this nutrition, it also makes it superior over so-called complete protein sources that society usually considers as normal sources of protein. And also notice that I don't eat any soy. This is without any supplementation with any protein powders. So this is just whole foods. So again, 100% overshooting on everything except for methionine. And the total value that I'm getting is about 75-80% daily value. So it's not bad. It's a pretty good metric here. So now let's jump into the next slide, which is related to the vitamins. So here I put recommended daily value as well as with amino acids on the y-axis. And I did not put vitamin D because vitamin D is synthesized when we have access to sun, and it's not synthesized if we live in New York. So I supplement with vitamin D throughout 9 months of no sun, of the polar night that we have in New York, and I don't supplement with vitamin D in the summer when I try to increase to maximize my exposure to the sunlight. So here we see essential vitamins, and again, we notice that except for vitamin E, we see a strong overshoot in all vitamins, and especially noticeable overshooting in vitamin K and vitamin C. Vitamin C is distributed in the body to fix so many functions. And what is interesting too, when I was reading The Return to the Brain of Eden, it actually demonstrated the claim that we developed mechanism of synthesis for vitamin D through the sun. But vitamin C became an essential vitamin because we are designed to receive surplus of it, while we're designed to not receive dietary sources of vitamin D, which is another facet of how we can regard the suitability and applicability of plant-based diet for a human. However, yes, vitamin C is an incredibly important vitamin that goes to that repairs our body, that maintains it in a good shape, reduces the wear and tear in the body. So with raw plant-based diet, when we don't thermally process anything, when food comes in its freshest whole form, especially if we don't dehydrate it, when we don't subject it to air, when we don't oxidize it after having it blended, when we eat in whole form and chew it in our mouth, we get about 1,000%. Here again, is for 3 oranges. I'm putting here in this dietary plan is 3 oranges, so this vitamin C comes from them and from the vegetables and greens in the salad. And then vitamin K. When we talk about dietary vitamin K, we typically talk about dietary vitamin K1, not vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is a tricky vitamin because as the same as B12, vitamin K2 is synthesized by the bacterium. So it is expected to find it in the tissues of animals, the same as B12. Those animals who ate dirt or was supplemented with those vitamins. So vitamin K2, which is not shown on this plot, and that vitamin is responsible for the retention and remineralization of the bones, that vitamin can be found in one food. It is natto beans. And another food where it can be found in a much smaller degrees quantity is sauerkraut. So sauerkraut will help to supplement with K2 vitamin in some small degree, but if you need to replenish it, if you're not confident, or if you need to uh, put those bacterial cultures in your gut, you can use natto beans, eat them for some time, and then just feed them with proper nutrition, proper fibers, and keep that colony producing vitamin K2 for you. So here are two, of course, impressive things that we observe in this graph: K1 and vitamin C. We can notice that, the vitamin K1, an important note here, and vitamin K1. Vitamin K1, if you take medicinal form, if you take it in the form of a drug, it will increase the blood coagulation. So it will have all sorts of interactions with other medications, with other factors. And it is a tricky vitamin to take in a drug form. However, so if you take this dosage in a drug form, you really need to think about what you're doing. When it comes from dietary sources, as everything, we have this magical regulatory system, how much body will extract and get for its own benefits. So you should not worry to overshoot vitamin K1, probably unless you're taking medicinal form of it. But if you're taking medicinal form of it, you probably could substitute it with just green nutrition. Then another important thing is B12. Let's look at B12 here. B12 is a tricky vitamin. Why? Because it has this true form and fake form. Let's word it this way. The true form of B12 can be found, of course, in synthetic sources, animal products that accumulated it from synthetic sources. So you will be the secondary consumer of the synthetic form of B12. It can be acquired from the bacterial synthesis inside of your body. And again, the deficiency of B12 develops slowly because B12 is a reaction mediator. It's not some disposable vitamin necessarily. And it can be found in the algae. What is the trick there? You may buy a spirulina, like myself, you may buy spirulina from Whole Foods and read on the label that it contains like 1,000,000% of vitamin B12, which will be a fallacy because it will contain the fake, like this false B12 that will sit on the receptors of B12 but not perform its function. So if you eat spirulina and then it's something else that contains true form of B12, then this true B12 won't be able to access those receptors. And true B12 in plant sources is contained in chlorella and specifically in the seaweed that is nori made of. So these are two sources. With spirulina, it's some symbiotic bacteria that coexists with this microalgae. So when you get spirulina, you get those bacteria as well. And same story with the nori. So nori, this dosage comes from just 5 sheets of nori. I wouldn't rely on this method of replenishing B12 if you right now have severe deficiency of B12 that's probably caused by some other conditions, such as weak stomach acid, such as such as improper nutrition, alcohol consumption, cigarettes, and so on. If you smoke anything, if you drink alcohol, if those will be dropping your B12 assimilation capabilities. So if you are now currently severely deficient and doctor prescribed you medicinal pharmaceutical form of B12 such as methylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin or cyanocobalamin, whichever you prefer, I would start with those and then use chlorella and nori as supplementary sources to keep it on the level. The reason for that is that while with chlorella, yes, you buy broken wall chlorella and it will have bioavailable B12, the trick is that not all chlorella is grown the same. Some chlorella will be produced in some more sterile environment in which there will be no bacteria that provide this B12. So you need to be sure that your chlorella was tested after it was produced and it has been consistent data that it contains B12. And with nori, seaweed requires you to gradually build the ability to break it apart, to break apart the walls of the seaweed. So with that, it will take you some time to learn to digest it. And you will get there, but not right away. And if you are already facing anemia from lack of B12, you must not wait because the damage can be pretty serious. So, yes, on the B12 subject, we stopped. Absolutely try raw nori. It's an incredible source not only of B12 but iodine, and we will see it on the next slide as well, which is concerning the minerals. So then, let's look at other vitamins. Vitamin E, you can supplement with sunflower seeds. They will be an incredible source of vitamin E. And if you don't mind eating refined oils, you can also add oil onto your salad. However, again, be mindful that oil will be pretty much an isolate, so some people give off inflammatory response to the oils. Then, certain plants, not just seeds, contain some vitamin E, not in huge quantities though. But yeah, most of it here comes from pumpkin seeds. And breakfast and lunch contribute as well, because we have some oily seeds there as well. So if we now look at another culprit that anti-vegan people will bring up is deficiency of vitamin A. Vitamin A deficiency is a thing that comes from the fact that vitamin A, beta carotene, requires oil, vitamin E to be assimilated by the body. I found two studies. One was 2 years or so before the newer one, and the newer one proved that plant-based sources of vitamin A or beta carotene, they are being as effective as in supplying people with vitamin A as other sources. So I will reference those studies down below and you can check them out. Then we see that we get about 320% daily value vitamin A, which majorly comes from the salad. Greens are a huge source of vitamin A, as well as you can see carrot here will have some, and peppers. Basically all vegetables to some degree provide vitamin A. It's not difficult to get it, and actually it may be even concerning whether you get too much of vitamin A, because it can interfere with other vitamin absorption. But the magic is that with plants, when you start researching it, plants are such a complete and thoughtfully designed food that you basically don't need to think about their interactions, as long as you consume whole foods and as long as you design your diet around the micronutrients. This is pretty much what I've done, and this is what I'm talking about right now. So group B vitamins. With B vitamins, important note here, again, A, B, C, E vitamins. That A, C, E are antioxidant vitamins, and B vitamins, they can be leached upon dehydration. So if you break your food down, if I took all this, milled it in the blender, and then stuck it in the dehydrator, most of this plot would just drop by like 70% or more. So this graph is only, those values are possible because I'm consuming all things that I'm showing here in their whole form. And of course, if we talk about B vitamins, bananas provide some. Hemp seeds are also very good. Then and then with folate, actually, look at the folic acid content in this graph. I mean, I'm overshooting by over 300. I'm over 300% of daily value of folate. Have you ever heard about any pregnant woman suggested to go on a whole food raw plant-based diet? I haven't, but folic acid is one of the things that women preparing for pregnancy and experiencing pregnancy must take pay specific attention to. So, if you're considering this, talk to your doctor about this possibility, because you see that all foods that I consume in a day, they supply a very decent chunk of folic acid to the diet. And now, let's move on to the minerals section. Here, the sad note before we jump into it is, of course, that soils are depleted. This is a popular thing that everybody's saying. So, whatever we see here in terms of mineral content, we need to cross our fingers that we're actually getting this. Then, another thing that people will say is that phytic acid binds the minerals, preventing them from getting released. But your body also adapts to extracting those minerals over time. So it's not something scary to be worried about. So let's look at where we are in terms of data. Again, recommended daily value 100 is shown in green here. And again, our outlier is selenium. Selenium I'm getting from Brazil nuts. It's incredibly important to keep in mind on raw plant-based diet to keep track of vitamin D, vitamin B12, selenium, iodine. Those things require you to consume specialized foods. Another group of nutrients are, of course, fatty acids. Those also require you to take special care of, which means that you must introduce hemp seeds and flax seeds, especially if other nuts and seeds are part of your diet, because those are very rich in omega 6 relatively to omega 3. The content of omega 3, omega 6 can be lower in them. But if you don't consume enough omega 3, you will be perpetually getting offset of you will be getting predominantly omega 6. If you look at omega 3 omega 6 ratio in fruits, it's pretty balanced to what we want, 3-1. But when you start introducing concentrated fatty seeds and nuts, this is when you are at risk of offsetting severely towards omega 6. And here's where it's important to eat flax seeds on a daily basis and hemp seeds on a daily basis, besides their other benefits. Again, hemp seeds is something that I swear by. Another thing is that if you eat some nuts, substitute them with walnuts as much as possible, because those also have, I think if I'm not mistaken, 3-1 ratios. It's pretty good. So what we see here, surplus of selenium. Selenium and iodine is a tandem, so if you eat enough iodine and don't enough selenium, your thyroid will experience certain problems potentially. So think about it. Brazil nuts are the best way to supplement with selenium. Wild Brazil nuts in their raw form, preferably if you can find them in the shells. I wasn't able to yet. I didn't look because they tend to get transparent, and I think they do oxidize after they lose their shell, because if you cut them in half, you see transparent outline and then white core. They're not too fresh usually when I buy them. Then we looked at the selenium, then let's look at iodine. Nori, again, nori is another thing that I swear by, along with other seaweeds. Now, unfortunately, Sea Tangle stopped selling their seaweed salad. Shame on you, because it was incredible. And I don't buy to the idea of kelp noodles because they don't digest properly, because they're just alginate. It's pretty synthetic product, in fact. So, whole seaweed, as much as you can find. Will supply you with surplus of iodine. And again, nori here is just 5 sheets. That's what I do per day, and that's enough. So the meal here that you see is nori. I mash avocado with lemon juice, and I wrap it in nori, and it tastes like fish. It's very refreshing and wholesome food, wholesome snack that keeps you full till dinner. So iodine, yeah, comes exclusively from raw nori. Then sodium here, it would be higher depending on the condiments that I eat. And also another thing that I introduce when I, for example, make less salad, I make green smoothie. My green smoothie usually consists of a whole bunch of celery. I usually do it about 3 times a week. Whole bunch of celery, kale, lime, several limes, and apples, green apples. So this will lift my sodium intake, and of course, some sprinkle of soy sauce on top of the salad will also bring sodium up. It's important to keep it on track because regardless, if even if you have the most perfect diet, sodium still the sodium that it's not in its whole form, then that doesn't come from celery in organic form, which when it comes from concentrated form, then it can mess up your calcium absorption, and it can also increase like blood pressure and do whatever. So if as a person with migraine, I know the feeling that excessive salt gives, so I would discourage anybody from consuming too much of salt. So sodium will be up. So here it's an underestimate. I don't know which value it will be precisely because I think my consumption of soy sauce gives about 30% daily value. So it will be at 60. So I will be somewhere here without my celery smoothie. Then, since we already mentioned calcium, calcium is at 100% here. Calcium has a funny story. So with calcium, actually once I wanted to see, like these tables, right? They are based on recommended daily values. Once I just had a question, where do recommended daily values come from? And the first suspect that I had was calcium, because when I was doing all those calculations, how to get all minerals from the diet, and raw plant-based diet is pretty much the only way you can get your essential minerals in their bioavailable form. Calcium was kind of hard to get. So turns out, recommended daily value for calcium comes from a study of small group of women, postmenopausal women with osteoporosis, that were given certain doses of calcium. And based on the insights from that study, recommended daily values for general population were developed. Then that study was already destroyed by further scientific research, but recommended daily values stayed. So this value of 100 for specifically calcium can be dropped down for up to 50%. And then again, another thing is that calcium comes to our body in some bound form when we receive it from plants. With greens, it's easier to extract it from greens than, let's say, from seeds and nuts, potentially, that are not activated, that are not sprouted. So with calcium, we're hitting 100% as of the recommended daily value that is published and currently is accepted. So then we should actually acknowledge and get happy about the surplus of other minerals if we believe in that our vegetables and seeds and nuts provide us stable values of those minerals, which of course might not be the case, but again, blood work will tell if with regular consumption of this diet I get sufficient. I do get comparable and the corresponding assimilation content of minerals. If blood work will show that it's true, then it will be good, of course. So manganese is one mineral that is always in surplus in the plants. Copper as well. And copper is actually a pretty important mineral to have in your diet. One is, of course, it's responsible for lots of superficial things. I didn't put sulfur here, but sulfur is also one of the cool things that in particular promotes hair growth. Then iron. Iron is another thing. Actually, I myself very interested in doing blood work because all my life I had low ferritin and I don't assimilate supplements really well. So supplements usually drive my blood serum iron content sky high. So doctor actually told me to back when I last did my blood work. It was when I just started being raw vegan. After I had some concern before I switched, and I came and she said, "Oh no, please don't take the supplements. Please do lots of greens and legumes." So I was like, "Pfft, sure thing." So iron we're supposed to be getting in surplus. It's not in surplus. It's not a heme iron. It is a slow release iron that does not produce any inflammatory response in the body, but again, it may drive some concerns with whether we get enough of it. But then for iron, we need vitamin C. So, in conjunction with the amount of vitamin C that we get from the same food from which we're extracting this iron, we should be pretty good. But I'm really curious. I would be a really nice subject to study the effect of plant-based diet on the iron, because again, I always had low ferritin, on the lower border, even when I was eating meat. So this is another thing that we need to think about. Then magnesium is high. Magnesium is one of the typical deficiencies currently in the American population in general. If you look at this table, it combats all deficiencies at those tables, all typical deficiencies with a huge surplus that American people currently have. And then if you also see how much omegas are provided by hemp and flax seed alone, you'll be also shocked. And if you also supplement this with seaweed, that seaweed also supplies a lot of omega-3. I need to do a little bit of more research on how the interplay of omega-3, omega-6, different varieties of them work together. But what I know is that seaweed, hemp, and flax, they provide good ratio of omega-3s, which is again important if we're consuming lots of nuts and seeds. So with this diet, as of the tables that we currently see, like phosphorus, zinc is another important mineral that is also, I forgot about it. It's a whole disputable thing also in anti-vegan community, because zinc is supposed to be something that the vegan people don't get. We get about 200%. And pumpkin seeds are a really great source of it. And you can diagnose yourself using your nails. If you eat low sugar diet and you don't have any white spots, you likely don't have zinc deficiency. So zinc is 200% daily value. So we cover all deficiencies that American people usually have. It's incredible. So if we now briefly go back to macros, we see that, to summarize it, right? We see that it's a high calorie diet, first thing, that supplies us with a ton of protein for what it is, from if we look at it from the perspective of people who are not familiar with such lifestyle, with a ton of fat, which is also surprising, kind of, right? Because again, people don't think that hemp seeds exist on earth, that flax seeds exist on earth, and they're both raw. And here, important notes that I don't mill them. I eat them whole. I don't oxidize them. And then if we look at amino acids, this wins the argument with anybody who is opposing raw plant-based eating. Because again, you eat amino acids with maximum bioavailability. You eat them with minimum waste of resources to extract them from your food. You don't thermally treat them. Then if you look at the profile of vitamins, you basically eat a supplement, because with this amount of food, with this amount of concentrated nutrition, concentrated in terms of that it was not augmented, it was not processed, it was not oxidized. You eat whole foods in there, the most wholesome form. You get surplus of those vitamins, again, that people are typically deficient in. So if you get those, and again, people forget that when you look at the nutritional value of certain foods, even salmon, you bake salmon, your omega-3s are gone by a huge fraction. It varies depending on the time of the preparation, but even at 50 degrees Celsius, the content of omega 3s drops. And this is the safe temperature to which you need to bake your salmon to make it edible. So, omega 3s are gone upon thermal treatment. Vitamins are gone upon oxidation and thermal treatment as well. B12 is thermally stable. B12 is thermally stable, but other B vitamins are not so much. Okay, vitamin A is thermally stable, but it's not stable to oxidation. Vitamin C is not thermally stable. So, all of those things combined tell me that this and this makes a really, really great, powerful nutrition. In contrary to what we hear from the mainstream. And then if we look at the minerals, let's make it complete. If we look at the minerals, then minerals, again, with being smart and being mindful about what we're doing, we're getting surplus of certain very important and actually rare to get minerals. Of course, I didn't put rare minerals here, those that we get in some nano quantities. I only put the ones that we get that are more abundant and more critical in our diet. But even with the calcium being a culprit, it's not anymore. And combined with all the symbiotic vitamins, we must speculate that absorption of those minerals will be better. And again, there is an approach to minerals bioavailability being in their raw form, because they come in our body in the part of certain organic molecule that can deliver them to the cell. Because again, when we do all this lab in the kitchen, we often break down the molecular structure that is intended for our body to assimilate. When we do certain food combinations, when we cook certain foods, when we expose certain things to environmental factors, when the fruit is broken down, for example, it can change its chemical structure, chemical shape of the molecule, and bind it with something. So it will not properly interact with the cell. It can just ultimately it can just deposit in the body as a sediment somewhere in the tissues that are already inflamed, for example, from the years of improper nutrition. So this is another consideration to make. Then where would I see the flaws of this diet? So the flaws here again, so all orange bars are calculated here for pretty large amount of greens that I sometimes drop down. So if we cut pumpkin seeds, I preserve at my favorite 100 grams. I eat them a lot because I want my zinc in, I want my protein in. If we cut, let's say, this bar alone by half, we can drop calcium down. But we will still be close to what we need to get as of recommended daily value for some abstract human. With vitamins, same story. Let's cut it in half. I mean, it doesn't bring us anywhere tragic necessarily. So even if you play around with this nutrition, as long as you keep those power foods in the game, as long as you get this nice amount of kale, let's say, parsley is a powerful source of the calcium as well. Parsley, I'm not sacrificing quantity of parsley ever. It's my favorite herb. If you keep hemp, flax, seaweed in your diet, avocado, and pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds, walnuts are not included here, but they would be a really great addition to this diet, then, you are set. So I would want you to please dispute if you have something to say. Make a response video and dispute every point that I made today. This is based off the calculations that I performed using open sources for nutritional values. And I compared some things that I was surprised about. Like, for example, with methionine and in pumpkin seed, I was like, oh, I don't believe this date. So I went to a couple of sources to verify that, and I was like, wow, sure. And yeah, let's have a discussion that is argumented. Other than that, I would encourage you to run your own research, to run your own study, such that you can design mindfully what you are going to eat, and don't negate the notion of micronutrient based diet. Don't negate the necessity to receive adequate amounts of omega 3. Don't negate the necessity of getting sufficient amount of greens in your diet. Um, and maybe you will find some formula that works better for you, but this diet is what I was able to come up to date, and this appears to me to be um the most complete nutrition. And here, yeah, of course, if we go into some lyricism around raw plant-based nutrition, if we go to more philosophical standpoint, of course, you can also introduce foods with certain like energetic properties. If you read Ayurveda, if you try combining raw plant-based eating style of eating with Ayurvedic principles, you can find perhaps certain functional foods as well, certain spices. Another important food that I didn't put here is, of course, coconut. Maybe coconut water will bring up some potassium up. I didn't mention potassium because I mean it's between 100 and 200%, surprising, because potassium is one of the minerals that is harder to get. But again, with the big salad, it jumps up. Even basically from breakfast, which has two bananas. Bananas are a good contributor of potassium, as well as hemp seed. Hemp seeds contribute to literally everything in this menu. So we get already from breakfast and lunch alone, we reach 100% RDV. Adding salad to it and offsetting potential like losses to maybe inefficient digestion or something whatnot. Yeah, thank you for watching. Let's discuss. Like, subscribe, and please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.